Coming to one of the last sessions here at Drupal GovCon 2019. Today I'm going to talk about Neil Armstrong's tips for building government websites. My name is NoahWolfe. I've been a web project manager for over a decade. I worked as a government contractor for over 6 years, BA in psychology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. I've worked on Capitol Hill, for a think tank, for philanthropy, and a handful of government contractors. Some of the clients that I've worked with includes NIH, the VA, NARA, and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Just talk a little bit about my background and why I have any kind of qualifications you can talk about what I'm going to talk about today. I'm a certified project management professional, also known as a PMP. I'm a certified Scrum Master, and I've also gotten a Safe for Agilist certification. The company that I currently work for is the TISTA Science and Technology Corporation. TISTA works with CMS, works with the VA. I do a lot of big data projects, also does a lot of PMO shop work, as well as a number of web projects. So 50 years ago, I'm going to get to the meat of the topic. So 50 years ago, this week, famously Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, right? They did this with the help of Michael Collins and 399,000 other people. This incredible human achievement, landing a person on the moon, ultimately was a US federal government project, right? Just like let that sink in, right? I presume everyone here has worked on some sort of government project. And so you know, like firsthand, what kinds of challenges you might expect to run into in a project such as landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth, right? This is arguably the most audacious goal ever conceived. And it was announced when the US has only orbited the Earth 3 times over the course of 4 missions. This technology did not exist. The audacity of this was incredible. So how was this accomplished? What I'm going to try to argue today is that a lot of the success can be attributed to agility. So agility is all the rage these days, right? But NASA really pulled this mission off long before iterative design, before user testing, before demos. For all these things are key components of like modern technology development, right? So when the government was figuring out how to do this incredibly dangerous work and developing unprecedented technology, essentially what I'm going to argue today is that basic Agile principles were used throughout. So let's talk about what Agile is, right? I wanted to at least define that. So there's all kinds of different Agile methodologies, right? You got Scrum, you got Kanban, you have lean software development, extreme programming. All these methodologies ultimately, though, I'm not going to propose a particular methodology, but all these methodologies all work off of some basic Agile principles. We'll talk about this briefly right now. So here we have like the Agile Manifesto. How many people here are familiar with this particular document? All right, so about a third. So basically the Agile Manifesto is trying to create a focus of how we think about our work, right? Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Doesn't mean you don't have processes or tools, but when you're trying to figure out, oh, do we just follow this plan, or are we going to realistically think about what our people need, what are we going to do? Individuals and interactions. Working software over comprehensive documentation. We're more interested in actually getting something out that works over that binder that's full of exactly how it all should work. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. One of the things I want to definitely touch on today is going to be responding to change over following a plan. Those main ideas in the manifesto are all built off of these 12 principles. They're all kind of difficult to read here, but a few of them I'm going to pull out is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, delivery of working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference over a shorter time scale, so constantly getting things out. Working software is the primary measure of success, right? Again, these are values, these are not specific series of steps. So why does it apply to, why do we care about this here at Drupal GovCon, right? So Agile has become, in some ways, a buzzword, but also an industry standard about how we think about our technology projects. And the more that something becomes an industry standard, the more our government is interested in applying that to our projects to make sure that we're really getting the best possible value for our taxpayer dollar, right? This chart here just kind of shows how frequently IT projects from the federal government are using the phrases agile or iterative. This only goes to 2017. I expect more recent data to be even higher, but very clearly there's a strong preference towards being agile in some way, shape, or form. My experience has been, however, that there's definitely a lot of resistance to actually embracing those ideas and bringing them into our projects, right? And there's all kinds of different reasons for that, right? Agile is very different from Waterfall. Waterfall being the like, hey, here's the plan, we're gonna do step 1, step 2, step 3. Agile being like, what is our goal? How are we gonna get there? And understandably, there's gonna be resistance because taxpayer dollars, billions of taxpayer dollars are being spent, and the government has to be a proper steward of those funds and making sure they're spent correctly. So to do something that's a little bit more loose, seemingly loose and free, understandably would be something that someone might balk at. So what I'm going to argue today is that in reality, government's been using Agile since the 60s. So going to the moon, right? When the space race kicked off, again, none of this existed. Agile wasn't a concept. These ideas existed in some form, but when trying to build the systems that we needed to go to the moon, really what was employed was what worked and what was useful. And I'm going to talk about some of those Agile principles today. Specifically, highest priority to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery, and we're going to use valuable software interchangeably with rocket hardware. Delivering working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Also within Agile is the idea of a minimum viable product. Like what is the most basic version of the thing that achieves your goal? Responding to change over following a plan, and working software as a primary measure of progress. All right, so deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with preference over a shorter time scale. Right, so some of the principles that I just mentioned have some overlap. Specifically here, what I want to focus on is time and the frequency of deployments. Famously during the space race, the two main groups that were battling was the United States and anyone? Soviet Union, Russia, any one of those, exactly. Russia had the first launch. They put a man not only in space but orbiting the Earth, and then the U.S. was trying to catch up. Right. First we put just Alan Shepard up into space, comes back down. A couple launches later, we got John Glenn in one orbit. Finally started getting some more orbits. Let's look at this on a scale that sort of shows the history of space launches from Yuri Gagarin in 1961 all the way to Apollo 11. Now, here the blue dots represent U.S. launches. Red dots are Russian launches or Soviet launches. And the reason they're going up, it's counting what number of launch it is in time, right? So here's the first Russian launch, a couple of U.S. launches, Russian launch, U.S. launches. What I noticed is at first, really is a little bit of like a back and forth where both sides are regularly putting out rockets into space. And then we get to like late 63, Russians get a whole bunch, and then from 65 to 66, nothing but American launches, right? So whereas at first there was some regularity, the group that ultimately was able to achieve the mission of going to the moon was frequently putting out iterations on the work they were doing. On average, the US is putting about 2.6 launches per year, and Russia just 1.5. So the ability to actually improve on the work that had been done and advance your project towards your ultimate goal. Seemingly part of this correlation is the more frequently you launch, the more quickly you're going to get to your ultimate destination. Also, let's recognize that Soviet Union, despite their program, ultimately decided, okay, we're not actually going to go to the moon for cost and other reasons. But again, if you're able to get ahead and actually achieve your goal, you're able to kind of push your competitors out as well. All right, so this is all great, but how does this actually apply to your projects, right? And I'm going to continue following this format of, hey, here's the Agile concept, here's how it applies to Space Race, and then what does it matter to you? So my experience as a project manager is there's definitely an impulse to like wait until everything is done, right? Whenever every single piece in place before we actually go and launch it, because if we're going to go live, we got to do additional testing. We have to like clean up all our branches. We have to verify any component conflicts, right? But really, that's the point. By doing all those things, you're making your software better. You're making sure that your product is in a better place, so that once you're actually going to go live, you've worked out a lot of those kinks. You're not figuring it out on deployment date. All right, so next one we're going to talk about is the Agile Principle of our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, right? So the customer, when you talk about the NASA space program, there's a couple of different customers. There's the American people. There are the actual users of the software, the astronauts who are going to be going into space. And what this really speaks to in my mind a lot is also the concept of an iterative approach, where it's not just how frequently you're doing it, but through continuous delivery, you're improving on each version of what you're doing. Let's look at that map against the space race. Right? So here are a whole slew of dates I pulled out, going from Mercury 1 all the way to Apollo 11, right? And then here in the notes under this iteration, I have sort of like, what is the iteration of what we're doing, right? The NASA figured out generally what their overall plan was. Okay, we got to go to the moon, we got to come back. What do we need? We need people to be able to go outside and walk in no atmosphere. We need to have a ship that can go around the moon. We've decided we're going to have another ship that's going to stay in orbit around the moon, so we need to figure out how two ships can rendezvous. We need to figure out how people can walk out in space. So let's look at this, right? Start off, Russia had already been out to space and orbited. The US is like, MVP, let's just get out there, right? We do a launch, okay? A couple iterations later, go in orbit. Next iteration, do a couple of orbits. Okay, now we got some new hardware, we got some thrusters, so now we're in the Gemini mission. So we do that. Let's get out that spacesuit. Let's see if that works. Check. Okay, trip to the moon's about a week. Can we make that work? Right? Check. Then we're doing rendezvous between two craft, getting to dock, and ultimately, all the way down to like Apollo 10, they literally flew to the moon and did everything short of actually landing on the moon, came back home, and then finally Apollo 11, they landed on the moon. Consistent iterative approach to like every step of the process, each piece built on the next one. Whereas frequently, we as developers might want to first build everything and then launch, or have it all in place because we know what all the pieces are, we know how they come together. But no, let's do one piece at a time because there's going to be unexpected things and adjustments we need to make. So that's what I was just talking about. How does it apply to your project? Keep iterating. Don't just be satisfied with, we got a plan, we know this works. No, go make a launch, do another launch, make adjustments, test each one. If you have something that's workable and you can go out there, go for it. So minimum viable product, or MVP, right? Or really the idea of getting the most basic version of your product out. So just a quick test of the room. Who are the first men to the moon? Just call it out. He was the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin. But first people to the moon? Anyone? Actually, it was Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and William Anders, right, in Apollo 8. They were the first. Neil and Buzz famously were the first people to step on the moon. But in 1968, the US was concerned that Russia was going to come up and do a launch and go to the moon and beat us to the moon. So we crafted a minimum viable product mission that got the US first to the moon, right? Apollo 8, this is like literally what their mission was. They literally looped around the moon. It also makes for a perfect patch that matches the number of their mission. But we had this trip. It was like December of 1968. We had like a famous Earthrise photo from that mission. But from a political standpoint, that goal was achieved, and no longer was there this tension over landing or getting there. The U.S. had gotten there first. We had MVP. We checked the box, and it reduced a lot of pressure on NASA and politically to keep the mission going. All right, so who decides what this MVP is, right? Well, let's go to another Agile concept of the user story. So JFK kind of laid out the user story for going to the moon, right? As President of the United States, I'd like to go to the moon because it is hard. This is a terribly written user story, right? Because it is hard is not a value, this is not actually the user story. Let's look at what JFK's probable user story was. As the President of the United States, I'd like to establish technical dominance in the world, so I have the upper hand in peace talks and warfare. Now I'm being a little bit, loud here, but ultimately that's what it was about, right? It wasn't about actually going to the moon. It was showing U.S. is number one. Nuclear missiles are popping up everywhere. A lot of concern about who's in charge, what's going on. If we want to go negotiate with the Soviets, we want to make sure that they have a reason to be concerned about who we are and what's going on, right? What is that ultimate mission? Why are we actually doing this thing? Why are we going to the moon? Because it is hard? That makes no sense. So let's go and break this down, right? So, as President of the United States, I'd like to establish technical dominance in the world so we can have the upper hand in peace talks and warfare. So let's break down the tasks, right? So task, we'll go to the moon, right? And do the other things, right? Again, terrible task. So we'll ignore that one, even though it's straight from the client. Land a man safely and return him to Earth, right? So really, that's really what was going on with the space race, right? We had political reasons to get out there, and the tasks were: we're going to go to the moon, we're going to land a man safely, return him to Earth. We'll go to the moon is achieved by Apollo 8. Apollo 11 gets us to land a man safely, and the goal is also to return him to Earth. If for some reason they weren't able to, maybe Apollo 12 would achieve that, or some other mission. But this is a way to kind of think about, okay, what is the ultimate goal here? Can we achieve some version of that for my ultimate client? That's going to progress the mission forward, continue, whether it is your political support internally or your funding within as a contractor, however it breaks down. But keep your eye on that goal and figure out what can you deliver MVP-wise. It's going to help give the support to the people above you to get the job done. All right, responding to change or following a plan. This one is a little bit specific, but so Neil Armstrong ultimately was a government employee, right? He had a GS level of something, right? And when they actually were up about to land, I'm about to show a short video that kind of gives you Neil's perspective of what the landing site was. I'm going to go ahead and start that now. I'm going to talk over it a little bit. Hopefully it won't be so loud.
321 down, 33 degrees. 100 feet down at 19.
So this crater over here, they were supposed to land
540 feet
over
down
in this
at
section.
30 and at 15.
And so this is Neil kind of tipping the LEM, trying to figure out where he wants to land.
400 feet down at 9.
And what he's seeing over here is a whole ton of rocks and boulders. So this is
150 feet down at 4.
Literally the entire world is watching him. And he's trying to execute the plan, but this is a no-go. So on the fly, he's making decisions. Okay, where else can he land?
300 feet down, 3.5. 47 forward.
So they're down to 275 feet. They're running out of time, and he has to make up a new plan in the moment. Craters, boulders.
50 down at 2.5. 19 forward. Altitude, velocity, light. 10.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down.
He's
5.5.
off script, running out of fuel. Arrows are going off in the
6.5
wind.
down. 5.5 down. 9 forward. Good. 120 feet.
120 feet.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%.
And over here he sees kind of an open spot. This is actually a
75 feet.
picture from the moon now. This is a picture of the lander in place, but
6 forward.
it was a blank spot that he found to land in.
60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward.
50 feet. He's eyeing this spot right now. Yeah, this is it. I'm gonna land here.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up the set. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drifting to the right. 20 down a half. 30 seconds. Forward.
That 30 seconds he called out was how much fuel was left.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ATA at a descent. Host control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in. We copy it down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Rocket. 3,000 feet. Copy.
So, again, the most possible pressure you can imagine on any human being ever. He's doing something completely unprecedented, like not just inhuman, just unprecedented in every possible conceivable way, shape, or form. He has a explicitly written out government plan where you are going to land, where you are going to be, and he decided in the moment, responding to change or following a plan. He saw the situation, saw the plan was wrong, and with the most amount of pressure I could ever imagine on a person, made a decision and changed the plan because that was what was right and that was what going to achieve mission success in that moment. Obviously, he made the right call, but that's the kind of thing I would encourage you to think about when you're working on your project. What can we adjust? What's wrong according to the plan and what we need to respond to? What change we need to respond to in order to achieve mission success? All right, so the last one I'm going to talk about here is working software is the primary measure of progress. Right. Again, earlier we talked about one of the Agile Manifesto principles. I'll just pull it up right here. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Right. You want something that works. Something that works is more important than a fully written out plan of how it's going to work. So, who won the space race? The United States. Why? Not because Boeing and Lockheed had all beautiful documents of how it was going to work. Because they actually did it. They actually launched the thing. It went live. It worked. Everyone can see it. End of story. No one asks about the documentation on the Saturn V. It's probably there. It's available. But what's important is they actually achieved the mission. Right? You still need to create the documentation. But first and foremost is actually achieving the goal. It's always about the demonstration. So going back to how this applies to your project. Can you show that you've actually achieved something? We always have to provide reporting, documentation, capture all the work that's been done, but ultimately what matters is, did the thing get achieved? Did the American people get value for the taxpayer dollars that went into your personal website project? So that's my conclusion. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have, and I'm available to talk if you'd like. You said the slide with the manifest, is that this one or this one? Oh, the Agile Manifesto. Sure. So the Agile Manifesto is also available online, and one of the things that I really like about the website where it is it's like a text and HTML website. They just really like embodied the MVP version of presenting that information. All right. Well, thank you all very much.